Despite careful planning, fighting went on into the night before the fort and all its outposts fell to the Mujahideen. Massoud's prisoners included 110 officers and NCOs, but the most important, an Afghan chief of staff, had been killed in the fighting. Massoud, having made his point, abandoned the fort. After questioning, the officers were taken to a Mujahideen prison higher up the valley, but all died during the Soviets' counterattack, shot, it's believed, by their guards. The American Stinger anti-aircraft missile, the weapon most credited with giving the Mujahideen an edge in the war. Just under 2 meters long, it weighs 17 kilos and, despite needing 136 hours training, the rebels soon mastered it. Its highly explosive warhead travels at twice the speed of sound and uses an infrared seeker to intercept its target at a maximum range of 6 kilometers. This one blew up without finding its target, and although the CIA, who supplied it, said it achieved a 70% kill rate, some, including Massoud, felt its impact exaggerated. But Soviet jets did have to fly higher and faster, making their bombing less effective, except when rebels assembled for rare mass attacks. And helicopters took to low flying in valleys, realizing Stinger could not be fired downwards from the positions Mujahideen usually adopted. Increasing use was made of anti-missile flares. It meant that the Soviet and Afghan forces lost their ability to control the air, giving the Mujahideen far greater freedom of action. Increasing convoys of helicopters and aircraft that had been shot down bore witness to some Mujahideen successes. But it remains a fact that the Soviets lost their frontline strike aircraft at a lower rate than the Germans were doing in training. South of Kabul, Soviet and Afghan forces mounted one of their biggest operations to break a guerrilla siege of Khost in Paktia province and smash their mountain strongholds at Zawar and elsewhere. 2,000 Soviet troops backed a 10,000-man Afghan army task force commanded by the Afghan General Staff. Having failed in a previous attempt to break resistance in that area, the government had decided to leave nothing to chance. But the show of heavy armor and artillery obscured the fact that the Soviets were, by now, committed to withdrawal. The assault was backed by the Mi-24, regarded as the world's most formidable helicopter gunship, as symbolic of this war as the United States Hueys in Vietnam. Its operational costs, though, were 3 times higher. Soviet pilots exhibited similar bravado. If it wasn't dangerous, we wouldn't be doing it, he said. The brand new Sukhoi Su-25 Frogfoot, armed with cluster bombs and 57mm rockets, proved to be the Soviets' most effective ground attack jet. Sukhois and MiGs spearheaded the airstrikes against the guerrillas' mountain strongholds, flying from Russian border bases as well as Afghan airfields. Their flight paths took them over a landscape that was cold and forbidding, even in an Afghan spring. These mountainous areas were controlled by several guerrilla groups, headed by the fundamentalist Hezb-e Islami. Previous attempts to dislodge them had failed, lulling them into a false sense of impregnability. Increasingly heavy air attacks softened up the guerrillas' positions. The rocket-propelled grenade was an optimistic anti-aircraft weapon. Flak narrowly misses a swooping Su-25. Its parachute-retarded anti-personnel bombs seek their target. Flares were released to deflect the British blowpipe missiles that were in use. These Soviet-designed 12.7mm Dashika heavy machine guns were a favoured anti-aircraft weapon. They claimed at least 3 helicopters and a fighter. But Soviet helicopters had now acquired armour-plated protection, limiting the effectiveness of these weapons. After days of constant use, anti-aircraft fire became increasingly inaccurate. The defenders had fired so many rounds that they had worn out their gun barrels. The Soviets said they destroyed over 250 Mujahideen fortifications in 3 weeks of bitter fighting. Fuel-air incendiaries were particularly effective. But Mujahideen supplies continued to reach hidden positions as the rebels regrouped. Some even received pre-prepared airline meals flown in from Saudi Arabia. The Mujahideen dug fresh networks of trenches and dugouts as others laid minefields out of sight of the new strongholds. The war's one set-piece battle had proved that they could be defeated, but their ability, like the Viet Cong, to regroup beyond national borders meant the Soviet and Afghan forces could not win an outright victory. By the winter of 1987, the Soviets were forced to move as Khost came under renewed siege. 40,000 people and an 8,000-strong garrison quickly ran short of food. Minefields slowed the progress of Operation Magistral to 1 kilometer a day. 18,000 men were on the move, a strong combined arms force including paratroops, artillery and motorized riflemen backed by helicopter gunships. Once more they were backed by some of the most effective airstrikes of the war. The sequence of bombs, then anti-missile flares, was by now routine. The airstrikes continued relentlessly for over a week. Some parachute-retarded cluster bombs mixed chemical and anti-personnel explosives. On land, too, enormous firepower was brought down by artillery and long-range missiles and rockets. But a journey that in peacetime would have taken 30 hours had already taken 32 days, further complicated by well-prepared Mujahideen ambushes. Scouts observe the slowly advancing convoys as a Mujahideen digs in prior to staging an ambush. The water will prevent rising dust revealing the position of the recoilless rifle crew. Though very efficient at ambush tactics, lack of command coordination meant that too many of these attacks were less effective than they might have been. Soviets dug in at the edge of the village, lay down covering fire.